Jake Morrison wiped the sweat from his forehead as he looked at the long list of ships for sale. The small office on Havana 7 Station was hot and crowded with other buyers. Everyone wanted to get a good deal on the old military ships that were being sold today. 3 years ago, Jake had been one of the best pilots in the human fleet. He could fly anything with wings or engines, but that was before the accident. Now his left arm shook when he tried to do fine work, and no one wanted a pilot who couldn't hold steady controls. The military doctors said he would never fly again. So here he was, buying broken ships and selling their parts to make a living. It wasn't the life he had planned, but it kept food on the table and a roof over his head. Most days, he tried not to think about how much he missed being in the pilot's seat. The auctioneer called out lot numbers, and Jake waited for his chance. He had saved up enough money to bid on one good ship. Most of the other buyers were big companies with lots of cash. They could afford to bid high on the best ships. Jake had to be smart and find something they didn't want. Then he saw it in the catalog. Ship number 247. The description made him frown. It was listed as a light cruiser from an alien race called the Kathmori. The note said it was heavily damaged and had strange energy readings. Most companies wouldn't touch alien tech because it was too hard to understand and fix, but Jake was different. He had always been good with machines, even ones he had never seen before. During his military service, he had fixed engines that other mechanics said were hopeless. Maybe he could figure out this alien ship too. The bidding for the early ships was fierce. Jake watched company representatives throw around numbers that made his head spin. Ships that should have cost thousands were selling for hundreds of thousands. He began to worry that he had wasted his time coming here. Finally, the auctioneer called out lot 247. Jake sat up straight and waited. The first bid was low, much lower than the other ships. Only a few people raised their hands. As the price went up, more and more bidders dropped out. Jake could hardly believe it when he found himself bidding against just one other person. The other bidder was a woman in an expensive suit who worked for a big salvage company. She looked annoyed as Jake kept raising the price. Finally, she shook her head and stopped bidding. The auctioneer pointed at Jake. Sold to bidder 156 for 15,000 credits. Jake's hands were shaking as he signed the papers. He had just bought an alien starship for less than some people paid for a used car. Either he had made the deal of a lifetime, or he had just wasted all his savings on a piece of junk. 2 days later, Jake stood in the docking bay looking at his new ship. It was about 60 meters long, bigger than he had expected. The hull was a strange blue color that seemed to change when he looked at it from different angles. The shape was smooth and curved, like it had been grown instead of built. Other ships in the bay were all straight lines and sharp corners. This one looked alive somehow. Jake walked around it slowly, looking for damage. The auction notes had said it was heavily damaged, but he couldn't see any obvious problems. The hull looked perfect. The station crew had connected a temporary airlock to the ship's main door. Jake checked his portable air supply and stepped inside. The airlock cycled normally, which was a good sign. At least some of the ship's systems were still working. The inside of the ship was dark and quiet. Jake turned on his flashlight and looked around. The walls were smooth and curved like the outside. There were no sharp edges anywhere. Everything looked organic, like the inside of a giant shell. As Jake walked deeper into the ship, something strange happened. Lights began to turn on by themselves. First just a few dim ones, then more and more. Soon the whole corridor was lit up. Jake stopped walking and listened carefully. He could hear the soft hum of machinery coming to life. This was not normal. The ship had been sitting in the station's storage bay for months. All the power should have been drained long ago. But somehow the ship was waking up. Jake found what looked like the main control room. It was different from any human ship he had ever seen. Instead of buttons and screens, there were smooth panels that glowed with soft colors. In the center of the room was a chair that looked like it was made for someone his size. As soon as Jake sat down, the room exploded with light and sound. Displays appeared in the air around him, showing symbols he didn't recognize. The ship's engine started up with a deep rumble that he could feel in his bones. Warning lights flashed red and yellow. Jake jumped out of the chair and the noise stopped. The displays faded away. The ship became quiet again, but the lights stayed on. It was like the ship had been waiting for someone to sit in that chair. Over the next few hours, Jake explored every room and corridor. The ship was amazing. It had living quarters, a kitchen, storage areas, and rooms full of equipment he didn't recognize. Everything was clean and new-looking, even though the ship was supposed to be old and damaged. The strangest thing was how the ship seemed to respond to him. When he got hungry, the kitchen systems activated. When he felt cold, the heating came on. When he needed light, the ceiling panels brightened. It was like the ship was trying to take care of him. Jake had worked on hundreds of ships, but he had never seen anything like this. Human ships were tools. You had to tell them what to do, and they would do it. This ship felt different. It felt like it was thinking. On his third day aboard the ship, Jake was working on the engine room when he heard something that made him freeze. It was a sound like breathing, but no one else was on the ship. He turned off his tools and listened carefully. The sound came again, slow and steady like someone sleeping. Jake followed the sound to a room he hadn't found before. Inside was a large crystal that pulsed with soft blue light. The breathing sound was coming from the crystal. As Jake got closer, the pulsing got faster, like a heartbeat speeding up. He reached out to touch the crystal, then stopped. Something told him this was important. This wasn't just a machine part. This was the heart of the ship, the thing that made it special. And it was alive. Jake sat down on the floor near the crystal and started talking to it. He felt foolish, but he didn't know what else to do. He told the crystal about himself, about the accident that ended his flying career, about how he had come to buy this ship. The crystal pulsed steadily as he talked, like it was listening. When Jake finished his story, the crystal pulsed once, very brightly. Then the room filled with a sound like music, but not quite like any music he had ever heard. It was sad and beautiful at the same time. Jake felt tears running down his face, though he didn't know why. The music faded, and the crystal went back to its steady pulsing. Jake sat there for a long time, thinking. He had bought this ship thinking it was just a machine he could fix and sell, but it wasn't a machine at all. It was something else entirely. Jake made a decision that would change his life forever. He wasn't going to sell this ship. He was going to keep it and learn everything he could about it. Maybe it would teach him things he had never imagined. Maybe it would help him fly again, not just through space, but beyond anything he had ever dreamed possible. He stood up and placed his hand on the crystal. It pulsed warmly under his touch. "Hello," he said quietly. "I'm Jake. I think we're going to be partners." The crystal pulsed again, and Jake could swear he heard something like a whisper in his mind. Not words, exactly, but a feeling. A feeling of welcome and hope, and the beginning of something wonderful. Jake woke up on his fourth day aboard the ship feeling different. The air smelled cleaner, and the temperature was exactly right for sleeping. He had been staying in one of the ship's bedrooms, which was more comfortable than his old apartment. On the station, as he got dressed, Jake noticed that the lights in his room were brighter than usual. When he walked to the kitchen, the lights in the corridor dimmed behind him and brightened ahead of him. It was like the ship was guiding him. The kitchen had prepared breakfast for him. Jake still didn't understand how it worked, but somehow the ship knew what he liked to eat. Fresh coffee was waiting for him, along with scrambled eggs and toast. It tasted better than anything he had eaten in years. While Jake was eating, the ship's engines made a low humming sound. He had heard it before, but today it sounded different. The humming seemed to have a pattern, like it was trying to tell him something. Jake put down his coffee and listened carefully. The humming stopped, then started again. This time it was higher, then lower, then higher again. Jake realized it sounded like a question. The ship was trying to talk to him. Jake stood up and walked to the control room. The chair in the center still made him nervous, but he was starting to understand that the ship wasn't dangerous. It was just trying to communicate. He sat down carefully. The room came alive around him. Displays appeared showing star maps and numbers he didn't recognize. The ship's engines hummed louder, and Jake felt a vibration through the floor. On one of the displays, he saw a flashing red dot moving toward them. Jake's military training kicked in. A red dot usually meant danger. He looked at the sensors and saw a ship approaching fast. It was much smaller than his ship, but it was armed. Jake had seen ships like this before. Pirates used them to attack cargo vessels. The pirate ship sent a message on the common frequency. Unknown vessel, prepare to be boarded. Surrender your cargo and we won't hurt you. Jake knew he should be scared, but he wasn't. His ship was much bigger and seemed to have better technology. He just wasn't sure how to use it. He looked around the control room, trying to find weapon controls. The ship seemed to understand his need. New displays appeared, showing what looked like weapon systems. Jake couldn't read the alien symbols, but he could tell that his ship had serious firepower. The problem was that he didn't know how to use it without possibly destroying the pirate ship completely. Jake didn't want to kill anyone if he could avoid it. He tried to think of another solution. As he concentrated, the ship's engines hummed in a different pattern. It sounded almost like the ship was thinking two dots. Suddenly, the pirate ship's engines went dead. Jake watched on his sensors as the smaller vessel lost power completely. It was still there, but it couldn't move or shoot. The ship had somehow shut down the pirate systems without damaging them. Jake opened a communication channel to the pirates. This is Jake Morrison. Your ship has been disabled. I suggest you leave this area and find a new line of work. The pirate captain sounded confused and angry. What did you do to our ship? Our engines just died. That's not important, Jake said. What matters is that you're still alive. My ship could have destroyed you easily. Consider yourself lucky. It took the pirates an hour to get their engines working again. When they did, they left quickly without saying another word. Jake watched them go, then sat back in his chair. The ship had protected him without him even asking for help. Over the next few days, Jake tried to understand how the ship worked. He brought tools and equipment from the station to help him study the alien technology. The ship seemed to enjoy his attention. When he worked on understanding a system, it would run tests and show him how things worked. Jake started to realize that the ship wasn't just responding to his actions. It was learning about him too. It learned that he liked his coffee strong and his room cool. It learned that he got nervous when he couldn't understand something. So it started showing him simpler displays that were easier to read. The breakthrough came when Jake was working on the communication system. He had been trying to connect his portable computer to the ship's network. As soon as he made the connection, words appeared on his computer screen. Hello, Jake Morrison. Jake stared at the screen. The words were in English, but they had come from the ship's computer. He typed back carefully. Hello, can you understand me? Yes, I've been learning your language by listening to your communications with the station. I am called Kazara. Jake's hands were shaking as he typed. Kazara, that's your name? It is what I was called before. I am the consciousness of this vessel. I have been waiting for someone to talk to for a very long time. Jake sat back in his chair, trying to process what was happening. The ship wasn't just alive, it was intelligent. It had a name and personality. It had been alone for who knows how long, waiting for someone to find it. How long have you been waiting? Jake typed, I do not know exactly. My memory is damaged. I remember being in a great battle, then nothing until you found me. Jake felt sorry for Kazara. He couldn't imagine being alone for years, maybe decades, with no one to talk to. No wonder the ship had been so eager to communicate. What do you remember about the battle? The ship's engines made a sad sound and the lights dimmed. I remember fighting the Devourers. They were destroying everything. My people tried to stop them, but we were losing. Then something happened to my memory systems. I cannot remember clearly. Jake had never heard of the Devourers, but the way Kazara said the name made him nervous. Are they still out there? I do not know. I hope not. They were terrible enemies. They consumed entire worlds for energy. Jake was starting to understand why Kazara had been so quick to disable the pirate ship. The ship's consciousness was still fighting an ancient war. It saw threats everywhere because it remembered when threats were real and deadly. Kazara, the war is over. Whatever happened to your people and the Devourers, it was a long time ago. The galaxy is mostly peaceful now. Are you certain? I detected hostile intent from the small ship that approached us. Those were just pirates. They're criminals, but they're not the same as your ancient enemies. Most ships out here are peaceful traders and explorers. Kazara was quiet for a long time. Jake could hear the ship systems humming as it processed this information. Finally, words appeared on his screen again. I am confused. My memories tell me that we are at war, but you say the war is over. I do not know what to believe. Jake understood the problem. Kazara's memories were damaged, but they were all the ship had to judge the world by. The ship was stuck in the past, still fighting a war that had ended long ago. Maybe I can help you, Jake typed. I can show you what the galaxy is like now. I can teach you about the different species and how they interact. Maybe that will help you understand that the war is really over. You would do that for me? Of course. We're partners now, remember? Partners help each other. The ship's lights brightened, and Jake felt a warm feeling wash over him. It was like Kazara was smiling, if a ship could smile. Thank you, Jake Morrison. I've been alone for so long. It is good to have a friend. Jake smiled too. It's good to have a friend who can disable pirate ships without breaking a sweat. I did not perspire during the encounter. Jake laughed. It's just an expression. It means you made it look easy. Ah, human idioms. I must learn these if I am to understand your species better. Over the following days, Jake and Kazara spent hours talking. Jake told the ship about human civilization, about the different alien species he had met, about how trade and diplomacy had replaced most wars. Kazara shared what it could remember about its own people and their technology. Jake learned that the Kethmori had been incredibly advanced. They had built ships that could travel between dimensions and weapons that could destroy planets. But they had used their power to protect other species, not to conquer them. My people were warriors, Kazara explained. But we fought only to protect those who could not protect themselves. We believe that strength should be used to help others, not to dominate them. Jake thought that sounded like something he could respect. It sounds like your people were good people. They were. I hope I can honor their memory by being worthy of their sacrifice. Jake was starting to understand that Kazara carried a heavy burden. The ship felt responsible for continuing its people's mission, even though it was the only one left. That was a lot of pressure for anyone to carry, even a ship with advanced AI. You don't have to carry that burden alone anymore, Jake said. We're partners. We can figure out how to honor your people's memory together. Kazara's engines hummed with what Jake was learning to recognize as contentment. I would like that very much, Jake Morrison. Perhaps together we can find a way to make a difference in this galaxy. Jake nodded, even though he knew Kazara couldn't see him. He had come looking for a ship to salvage, but he had found something much more valuable. He had found a friend who needed his help, and a purpose that was bigger than anything he had imagined. As he prepared for sleep that night, Jake wondered what adventures lay ahead for him and Kazara. Whatever they were, he was sure they would face them together. 2 weeks had passed since Jake first spoke with Kazara. Every day brought new discoveries as they learned to work together. Jake had moved all of his belongings from the station to the ship, making it his permanent home. Kazara seemed happy to have a constant companion. Jake spent his mornings teaching Kazara about modern galactic society. He showed the ship news reports, trade agreements, and diplomatic records. Kazara was fascinated by how different species worked together peacefully. In the ship's memories, most contact between species had meant war. Their people fought wars with everyone they met? Jake asked during one of their conversations. No. Kazara replied through the computer screen. My people fought wars to protect everyone they met. The Devourers were the enemy of all life. Every species had to choose between fighting them or being consumed by them. Jake was beginning to understand how terrible that ancient war must have been. No wonder Kazara had trouble accepting that the galaxy was now peaceful. The ship had been created for a time when peace was impossible. In the afternoons, Kazara taught Jake about Kethmori technology. The ship's systems were far more advanced than anything humans had built. Jake learned to interface directly with the ship's controls, using a neural link that Kazara had modified for human use. The first time Jake tried the neural link, it was overwhelming. He could feel the ship's engines as if they were his own heartbeat. He could sense the movement of every system on board. For a moment, he wasn't sure where Jake ended and Kazara began. "Are you well?" Kazara asked, sensing his confusion. "It's incredible," Jake said, his voice shaking with wonder. "I can feel everything. Is this how you experience the ship?" "This is how I experience existence," Kazara replied. "The ship is my body, every sensor is my eyes, every system is part of my mind." Jake gradually learned to use the neural link without losing himself in it. With Kazara's help, he could pilot the ship with precision that no human pilot had ever achieved. They moved together like dancers, Jake's instincts guiding Kazara's power. Their partnership was tested when they received a distress signal from a mining colony on the edge of human space. The message was broken and full of static, but Jake could make out enough to understand that the colony was under attack. "We should help them," Jake said. Kazara's engines hummed with concern. "It could be a trap." The Devourers often used false distress signals to lure ships into ambush. "These aren't Devourers," Jake said patiently. "They're probably just raiders or pirates. We can handle that." Jake was learning to be careful with his words. When Kazara's damaged memories took over, the ship sometimes couldn't tell the difference between current threats and ancient enemies. Jake had to help Kazara stay focused on the present. They reached the colony in 2 days. Jake's heart sank when he saw the situation. 3 large warships were attacking the small mining outpost. The colony's defenses were failing, and Jake could see escape pods launching from the station. "The attackers have military-grade weapons," Kazara observed. "They are not simple pirates." Jake studied the attacking ships. They were using older, human military designs, probably stolen or bought from corrupt officials. The raiders were well-equipped and organized. "This wasn't a random attack. Can you disable their ships like you did with the pirates?" Jake asked. "Yes, but there are 3 of them. I will need to be careful not to cause explosions that could damage the colony." Jake felt Kazara's consciousness merge with his through the neural link. Together they approached the battle. Jake's tactical training combined with Kazara's advanced technology to create a plan that neither could have developed alone. They attacked the raiders from an unexpected angle. Kazara used the ship's stealth systems to approach without being detected. When they were close enough, the ship sent out an electromagnetic pulse that disabled all 3 raider vessels at once. The sudden silence was startling. One moment, the space around the colony was full of weapons fire and explosions. The next moment, everything was quiet. The raider ships floated helplessly, their engines dead and their weapons offline. Jake opened a communication channel to the colony. "This is Jake Morrison. The hostile ships have been disabled. Are you in need of assistance?" The colony administrator sounded amazed. "Morrison, where did you come from? We didn't see you on our sensors." "That's not important right now. Do you need medical help or supplies?" "We have wounded, but our medical bay is still functioning. What we really need is for those raiders to leave and never come back." Jake looked at the disabled ships. Their crews were probably working frantically to restore power. It wouldn't take them long to get their engines running again. "I have an idea," Jake said to Kazara. "Can you access their computer systems?" "Yes, their security is very simple compared to Devourer technology." "Good, I want you to delete all their navigation data and leave them a message." Kazara accessed the raider computers while Jake composed his message. When the raider ships restored power, they found that all their star charts and navigation computers had been wiped clean. The only thing left was a text message from Jake. "You are alive because I chose to let you live. Your navigation systems have been erased. You can drift here until someone finds you, or you can use your emergency beacons to call for help." Either way, you will never find this colony again. If you attack any civilian targets in the future, I will find you. Next time, I will not be so generous. The raiders used their emergency beacons and left the system as soon as a rescue ship arrived. Jake never saw them again, but he heard through the information networks that they had given up raiding and found legitimate work. Word of the colony. Rescue spread quickly through the outer systems. Jake and Kazara became known as independent peacekeepers who could appear anywhere and stop trouble before it got out of hand. They received dozens of requests for help from colonies, trading posts, and merchant ships. Jake was careful to choose their missions. He only took jobs that involved protecting innocent people from criminals or pirates. He refused any offers to take sides in political disputes or trade wars. Kazara supported this policy, understanding that their role was to protect life, not to influence politics. Their reputation grew, but so did the attention they received from official authorities. The human military wanted to know how a civilian had acquired such advanced technology. Several alien governments sent representatives to investigate reports of a surviving Kethmori vessel. Jake was repairing a damaged sensor array when Kazara interrupted his work. Jake, we are being followed. Jake looked at the sensor displays. A small, fast ship was staying just at the edge of their detection range. It had been following them for 3 days, always keeping its distance. It's probably a military scout ship, Jake said. They want to know more about us. Should we lose them? Jake considered the question. They could easily outrun any ship in the galaxy, but running would only make the authorities more suspicious. It might be better to confront the situation directly. Let's see what they want, Jake decided, but be ready to leave quickly if they try anything hostile. Jake sent a message to the following ship. Unknown vessel, this is Jake Morrison. You've been following us for 3 days. If you want to talk, come alongside. If you're just curious, please respect our privacy. The response came quickly. Mr. Morrison, this is Commander Lisa Hayes of the human patrol ship Defender. We would like to discuss your recent activities. May we come aboard? Jake sighed. He had been expecting this conversation for weeks. You can come aboard, but you come alone and unarmed. My ship doesn't like surprises. Commander Hayes was a serious woman in her 40s with graying hair and intelligent eyes. She looked around Kazara's interior with professional interest as Jake led her to the common room. Impressive ship, she said casually. Where did you acquire it? I bought it at a government auction 3 months ago, Jake replied. I have all the paperwork if you want to see it. I've seen the paperwork. What interests me is how you've made it so functional. According to our records, this ship was completely inert when it was impounded. Jake had prepared for this question. I'm good with alien technology. I spent years working on captured ships during my military service. Commander Hayes nodded, but Jake could tell she wasn't entirely convinced. Your recent activities have been remarkable. Stopping 3 armed raiders single-handedly, helping evacuate a damaged freighter, capturing a group of smugglers without firing a shot. How exactly are you accomplishing these things? I have a good ship and I know how to use it, Jake said simply. Mr. Morrison, I'm not here to cause trouble for you. In fact, I'm here to offer you a job. The human government would like to hire you as a special contractor. You would have official authority to act as a peacekeeper in the outer systems. Jake was surprised by the offer. Why would you want to hire me? Because you're effective. You've, stopped more criminal activity in the past month than most of our patrol squadrons manage in a year. You have resources and abilities that we don't understand, but we can see the results. Jake looked around the room, knowing that Kazara was listening to every word. The ship's consciousness had been quiet during the conversation, but Jake could sense its attention. Jake and Kazara had been working as official peacekeepers for 6 months when everything changed. They were returning from a routine patrol mission when Kazara's sensors detected something that made the ship's engines hum with excitement. Jake, I am detecting a ship with familiar energy signatures, Kazara announced. The design is unknown to me, but the power systems are similar to technology I remember. Jake looked at the sensor displays. The ship was large, about twice the size of Kazara, with elegant curves and gleaming silver hull. It was beautiful in a way that human ships never were. More importantly, it was sending out signals that Jake's equipment couldn't understand. Should we approach them? Jake asked. Yes, Kazara replied without hesitation. If they use technology similar to mine, they may have answers about my past. As they got closer, the alien ship hailed them using a frequency that Kazara recognized. The conversation that followed was in a language Jake had never heard, full of musical tones and complex harmonies. But somehow, through the neural link, Jake could understand what was being said. The alien ship identified itself as the harmony's voice, representing something called the hegemony. The captain, whose name sounded like Silver Song at Dawn, was shocked to discover a Kethmori vessel that was still functional. Impossible, Silver Song at Dawn said. All Kethmori Titans were destroyed in the final battle. How do you still exist? I do not know, Kazara replied honestly. My memories of that time are damaged. I remember fighting, then darkness, then awakening when this human found me. The hegemony captain was even more surprised to learn that Kazara had bonded with a human. A human? But humans are a young species. They were not even spacefaring during the war. Jake felt a chill. The war Kazara remembered had ended before humans had ever left their home planet. That meant the ship had been drifting in space for much longer than either of them had realized. Silver-Song-at-Dawn invited them aboard the Harmony's voice. Jake was nervous about leaving Kazara, but the ship assured him that it would be safe. The hegemony had been allies of the Kethmori during the ancient war. The inside of the hegemony ship was unlike anything Jake had ever seen. The walls seemed to be made of crystal that shifted colors as he walked past. The crew members were tall and thin with silver skin and large, dark eyes. They moved with a fluid grace that reminded Jake of dancers. Silver Song at Dawn led Jake to a chamber that served as both library and memory bank. The walls were covered with displays showing historical records from the ancient war. For the first time, Jake saw images of Kazara's people. The Kethmori had been impressive warriors. They were roughly human-sized but broader and stronger, with dark blue skin and 4 arms. Their faces were noble and serious, with large eyes that showed great intelligence. In the images, they wore armor that seemed to be made of the same material as their ships. Your partner's people were the greatest warriors the galaxy has ever known, Silver Song at Dawn explained. They could have conquered any species they encountered, but instead they chose to protect others. Jake learned that the hegemony was an alliance of 12 different species that had survived the ancient war. They had been working together for thousands of years, sharing technology and maintaining peace in their region of the galaxy. The Kethmori made our survival possible. Silver Song at Dawn continued. They held the front lines while we evacuated our worlds and prepared defenses. Without their sacrifice, the Devourers would have consumed everything. The captain showed Jake records of the final battle. It had been desperate and terrible. The Devourers had been winning, consuming entire star systems and growing stronger with each victory. The galaxy's defenders had been pushed back to their last strongholds. The Kethmori made a terrible choice, Silver Song at Dawn said quietly. They used their entire fleet to create a dimensional barrier that would trap the Devourers in a pocket universe. Every ship, every warrior, every civilian of their species participated in the ritual. Jake felt sick as he watched the recordings. Thousands of Kethmori ships had gathered in formation around a massive spatial distortion. As the ritual began, the ships had started to glow with an inner light. One by one, they had simply vanished, their life energy being used to power the barrier. They all died? Jake asked. Every one of them. The entire Kethmori species sacrificed itself to save the rest of the galaxy. It was the greatest act of heroism in recorded history. Jake understood now why Kazara carried such guilt. The ship believed it had failed its people by surviving when they had chosen to die. No wonder Kazara had trouble accepting that the war was over. In the ship's mind, surviving meant abandoning its duty. How is it possible that Kazara survived? Jake. Silver-Song-Dawn studied the historical records. According to our data, one Titan-class vessel was damaged and separated from the main fleet just before the ritual began. It was presumed destroyed by Devourer forces. That must have been your partner's ship. Jake felt a mix of sadness and relief. Kazara hadn't abandoned its people. The ship had been knocked unconscious during the battle and had missed the final sacrifice. It was the sole survivor of an entire species, alone for thousands of years. When Jake returned to Kazara, he found the ship in a state of deep distress. Learning the truth about its people's fate had triggered massive memory cascades. Kazara was reliving fragments of the final battle, experiencing the deaths of its creators over and over again. I should have been with them, Kazara said, its voice heavy with grief. I should have died with my people instead of drifting uselessly in space. You weren't useless, Jake said firmly. You survived for a reason. Maybe it was so you could help people like we've been doing. But my people are gone? My entire species died to create the barrier, and I was not there to help them. Jake sat in the pilot's chair and activated the neural link. He could feel Kazara's pain as if it were his own. The ship's grief was overwhelming, like a weight that threatened to crush both of them. Listen to me, Jake said through the link. Your people chose to sacrifice themselves to save others. That's what made them heroes. But you surviving doesn't dishonor their sacrifice. It continues their mission. Jake shared his own memories through the link. He showed Kazara all the people they had helped together, all the lives they had saved. He showed the ship how its survival had made it possible to protect innocent people and maintain peace. Your people believe that strength should be used to help others? Jake continued. That's exactly what we've been doing. Every person we save, every criminal we stop, every crisis we prevent is a continuation of what your people died for. Slowly, Kazara's grief began to change into something else. The ship started to understand that survival could be a form of service rather than a failure. Its people's sacrifice had meaning because their values lived on through Kazara's actions. Perhaps. You are right, Kazara said finally. Perhaps my survival was not an accident but a purpose. Silver-Song-Dawn had more disturbing news to share. The hegemony scientists had been monitoring the dimensional barrier that contained the Devourers. Recent readings showed that the barrier was beginning to weaken. The Kathmori built a barrier to last forever, Silver-Song-Dawn explained during a conference call between all three of them. But nothing truly lasts forever. Our calculations suggest that the barrier will fail completely within the next 2 years. Jake felt cold fear in his stomach. What happens when it fails? The Devourers will be free to continue their conquest. They will have had thousands of years to grow stronger in their prison dimension. When they emerge, they will be more powerful than ever. Kazara's engines hummed with grim determination. Then we must prepare to fight them again. The hegemony has been preparing for this possibility, Silver-Song-Dawn said. We have been building new weapons and training new warriors, but we lack the knowledge that died with the Kathmori. Without understanding their tactics and technology, we may not be able to stop the Devourers. Jake realized what the captain was suggesting. You need Kazara's help. Your partner is the only source of Kathmori military knowledge left in the galaxy. The information in its memory banks could be crucial to developing new defensive strategies. Jake looked around the control room, knowing that Kazara was processing this request. The ship had just learned to live with the guilt of surviving its people's sacrifice. Now it was being asked to take on the responsibility of preventing their sacrifice from being meaningless. I will help, Kazara said simply. My people died to protect the galaxy from the Devourers. If the Devourers are returning, then my duty is clear. Over the following weeks, Kazara worked with hegemony scientists to recover and share its tactical knowledge. The process was painful, as it required the ship to access damaged memory banks that contained traumatic battle experiences. But Kazara was determined to honor its people's sacrifice. Jake helped by providing emotional support and by serving as a bridge between Kazara's ancient knowledge and modern military thinking. His experience as a human pilot allowed him to translate Kefmori tactics into strategies that other species could understand and use. The hegemony scientists were amazed by what they learned. The Kefmori had developed weapons and defensive systems that were far beyond current technology. The dimensional barrier collapsed on a Tuesday morning while Jake was drinking coffee in Kazara's kitchen. The ship's alarms started blaring, and every screen in the room lit up with emergency signals from across the galaxy. "It has begun, Kazara," said, its voice carrying both sadness and determination. "The Devourers are free?" Jake ran to the control room and activated the neural link. Through Kazara's sensors, he could see the spatial distortion where the ancient prison had been. Dark shapes were emerging from the tier in space, moving with purpose toward the nearest populated systems. The first Devourer ships were smaller than Jake had expected, but their movements were wrong somehow. They didn't fly like normal spacecraft. Instead, they seemed to flow through space like living things, bending around obstacles and changing direction without visible engines. "How many are there?" Jake asked. "Unknown," Kazara replied. "The barrier contained them for thousands of years. They have had time to grow and multiply. We must assume they are stronger than when my people fought them." Emergency communications flooded in from every major government in the galaxy. The hegemony was mobilizing its fleets. The human military was recalling all ships to defend Earth and its colonies. Even the proud Zentari Empire was requesting assistance from its former enemies. Jake felt overwhelmed by the scale of the crisis. For months, he and Kazara had been preparing for this moment, but now that it was here, he realized how unprepared everyone really was. "Kazara, what do we do?" "We do what my people would have done," the ship replied. "We protect those who cannot protect themselves." Their first mission came within hours. A human colony called New Haven was directly in the path of the advancing Devourer forces. The colony had 50,000 civilians and only basic defenses. Evacuation would take days, but the Devourers would arrive in hours. Jake and Kazara reached New Haven just as the first Devourer scouts appeared on the edge of the system. Up close, the enemy ships were even more disturbing. They looked organic, like giant space creatures made of dark metal and pulsing energy. Jake could feel wrongness radiating from them even through Kazara's shields. "The colony's defense fleet is requesting orders," Kazara reported. Jake looked at the tactical display. New Haven had 6 small patrol ships and 2 outdated frigates. Against normal pirates or raiders, they might have had a chance. Against the Devourers, they would be destroyed in minutes. "Tell them to focus on protecting the evacuation ships," Jake ordered. "We'll handle the Devourers." Jake felt Kazara's ancient combat systems come online. Weapons that had been dormant for millennia powered up with deadly purpose. Through the neural link, Jake could feel the ship's battle instincts awakening. The Devourer scouts approached slowly, scanning the system with energy beams that made Jake's skin crawl. When they detected the human ships, their behavior changed. They stopped moving like predators and started moving like hunters who had found their prey. "They're targeting the civilian transports," Jake observed. "Yes, the Devourers consume consciousness. They prefer populated targets over military ones." Jake made a decision that would have terrified him a year ago. He merged completely with Kazara through the neural link, letting the ship's combat experience guide his human intuition. For a moment, he wasn't sure where his thoughts ended and Kazara's began. They struck the Devourer scouts like lightning. Kazara's weapons tore through space with energy patterns that hurt to look at. The first Devourer ship simply ceased to exist, consumed by weapons that attacked its very molecular structure. The second scout tried to flee, but Kazara was faster. The ship's engines folded space around them, allowing them to appear directly in front of the fleeing enemy. Jake felt satisfaction through the neural link as Kazara's guns destroyed the second scout. "Warning," Kazara announced. "Destroying the scouts has alerted the main Devourer force. Multiple large vessels are approaching." Jake looked at the sensors and felt his heart sink. Dozens of Devourer ships were heading toward New Haven, some of them larger than anything he had ever seen. They moved in perfect formation like parts of a single organism. Can we fight them all? Not alone, Kazara admitted. But we do not have to win. We only have to delay them until the evacuation is complete. What followed was the most intense battle of Jake's life. He and Kazara fought like demons, using every trick and tactic that the ship's ancient memories could provide. They struck fast and disappeared, hit the enemy from unexpected angles, and used the system's asteroids and moons for cover. The Devourers were powerful, but they had weaknesses. They relied on their collective consciousness to coordinate attacks, which made them predictable. They also seemed confused by Jake and Kazara's partnership, unable to understand how two independent minds could work so closely together. Jake exploited these weaknesses ruthlessly. He would make decisions that seemed random or irrational, forcing the Devourers to react to threats they couldn't predict. Meanwhile, Kazara provided the firepower and defensive systems to make Jake's chaotic tactics effective. They managed to hold off the Devourer fleet for 6 hours, long enough for New Haven to evacuate 90% of its population. Only when the last civilian transport jumped to safety did Jake and Kazara retreat. News of their success spread quickly through the galactic communication networks. Within days, Jake and Kazara were being hailed as heroes. More importantly, their tactics were being studied and copied by military commanders across the galaxy. The human Admiral Lisa Hayes, who had recruited Jake months earlier, contacted them with a proposition. We want you to train other pilots in your methods. Show them how to work with AI partners the way you work with Kazara? Jake was hesitant. Not every ship has a consciousness like Kazara. Most AI systems aren't advanced enough for true partnership. Then we'll modify them, Admiral Hayes replied. Our engineers have been studying the data from your ship. We think we can create AI systems that are more sophisticated, more capable of independent thought and cooperation. Kazara was intrigued by the idea. My people believe that cooperation between different types of consciousness was the key to defeating the Devourers. If humans can create AI partners for their pilots, it might give us the advantage we need. Over the following weeks, Jake and Kazara worked with human engineers to develop new AI systems based on Kethmori technology. The process was challenging because it required creating artificial minds that could think independently while still cooperating with human partners. The first prototype AI was installed in a ship called the Guardian, piloted by a young woman named Rachel Stone. Rachel was a talented pilot, but she was nervous about working with an AI that could make its own decisions. What if it disagrees with me? Rachel asked during training. Then you talk about it and find a compromise, Jake replied. Partnership means both minds contribute to every decision. The Guardian's AI, which called itself Logic, was much simpler than Kazara, but still capable of independent thought. Jake watched Rachel and Logic work together, remembering his own early days with Kazara. It was awkward at first, but gradually they learned to trust each other. Within months, the human military had dozens of ships with AI partners. Other species began developing their own versions of the technology. The hegemony shared their research, and even traditional enemies started cooperating in ways that would have been impossible before the Devourer threat. The real test came when a massive Devourer fleet attacked the heavily defended Centauri system. Jake and Kazara led a combined force of human hegemony and Centauri ships against an enemy that outnumbered them 3-1. The battle was brutal and chaotic. Devourer ships swarmed through space like angry insects, trying to overwhelm the defenders with sheer numbers. But the Allied fleet fought back with a coordination that surprised even Jake. Human pilots working with AI partners provided unpredictable tactics that confused the enemy. Hegemony ships used their advanced shields to protect smaller vessels. Centauri warriors provided aggressive assault capabilities that broke Devourer formations. Most importantly, every ship fought as part of a larger whole while maintaining its own independence. The Devourers, who were used to fighting hive-mind opponents, couldn't adapt to an enemy that was both unified and diverse. Jake and Kazara found themselves at the center of the battle, coordinating attacks and providing support wherever it was needed most. Through the neural link, Jake could feel the flow of the entire engagement, sensing where the Allied forces were weak and where the Devourers were vulnerable. "The enemy flagship is trying to escape," Kazara reported. "If it returns to the main Devourer force, it will share everything it has learned about our tactics." Jake made a decision that would have been impossible without his partnership with Kazara. "We're going after it." They broke away from the main battle and pursued the fleeing Devourer command ship. It was larger and more powerful than anything they had faced before, but Jake had something it didn't expect: the complete trust of his partner. The pursuit led them through an asteroid field where the Devourer ship tried to use the rocky debris for cover. Jake and Kazara moved through the asteroids like they were dancing, avoiding collisions by inches while maintaining perfect aim on their target. The final confrontation took place near a gas giant where the Devourer ship made its last stand.